Hey guys, it's Callan again with an early review for Knives Out. And what Knives Out is essentially about is we center on the Thrombey family. They are your typical socialites, very wealthy family in the way, and the patriarch of that family is this very successful sci-fi novelist, and he ends up supposedly committing suicide on the day of his 85th birthday. So now the family is now trying to investigate what could have happened. They call in this detective who feels that this was in fact a deliberate act and that there was more going on than just it being a suicide. He feels that this was in fact a murder. So now the family has to uncover what might have possibly caused this, and pretty much everyone is a suspect, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Knives Out overall, I was very excited for this film. The second I heard that Rian Johnson had another film in development, I was definitely really excited to see what he would do. I love pretty much everything I've seen from him, although I've only seen The Last Jedi. I do really love that film overall. I know that it gets a lot of backlash, but I actually loved how different and how, the very radical directions that ended up taking. I was excited to see what Johnson was going to do here with the cast he assembled and it being a murder mystery. I was just so on board with this film, and I have to say, Knives Out absolutely lived up to the hype. This is easily one of my favorite films of the entire year that is very different from what you're expecting, but one that I can't recommend enough and truly is every bit as good as people have been saying. But we'll just get into it right now, starting off with the cast. And I mean, with a cast like this, we are already expecting them to be great, but I mean, they're even better than I really was expecting most of them to be. Let's talk about Daniel Craig. Holy shit. I mean, look, I've loved Daniel Craig in things like the Bond films and things like that, but it's roles like this where he plays these very eccentric, weird, characters that are, and he really gets to show off his acting chops. And this is easily one of his best performances yet. The character of Ben Blanc is such a delight in that way. He is a detective, but he's not your typical detective. He has a very interesting way of going about things. He's also always on the case. He's very charismatic in that way, and I just thought overall he did a really great job here. He chews up all the scenery with this absolutely ridiculous Southern accent that he is absolutely purposefully going over the top with, and I just loved every second that he was on here. He has some of the funniest moments in the entire film. One especially involving this donut. I don't want to get into it too much, but anytime he would come back to this sort of philosophy, I thought it was absolutely hysterical. He just had me in stitches throughout this entire film, but also ends up giving one of the most impressive performances of his entire career. And if it was up to me, he would absolutely be a lock for a supporting actor nomination. I truly do think he is that good here. This is easily one of his best performances to date, and I just absolutely loved everything he was doing in this film. However, surprisingly, he's not the main character of this movie. The main character of this movie really is Ana de Armas. This very much is her film, and she just completely commands every single second of this film that she's in. I mean, her character, I can't get into too much because it involves major spoilers, but the way that she goes about it, let's just say that she was very heavily involved with the Thrombey. She was their maid, and she had a very personal reaction to Harlan's death in that way, and the way that she ends up coping with it and what eventually ends up happening to her because of it, I just thought was very effective, and De Armas did such a great job playing this character. You can see how she's feeling throughout the entire movie. You really do sympathize with her in that way, and she really is the heart of the film. She's someone that you aren't expecting to care about as much as you do, but not just because of the writing, but because of De Armas's performance, she just really does a lot to make you care about this character, and I just really love what she ended up doing here, and for me, I think she was absolutely one of the big standouts. I think Daniel Craig was like the big standout, but she comes very close for sure, because I absolutely loved her in this movie, and probably gives her best performance to date. I've loved her in things like Blade Runner 2049 and things like that, but after this film, I cannot wait to see what she's going to do next. This is absolutely the definition, just a really great breakthrough performance from her, and especially knowing that she's going to be with Daniel Craig in the next Bond film, I just cannot wait to see what she's going to do here, because I think she absolutely killed it in this film. As far as the rest of the cast goes, everyone else does a fantastic job. Chris Evans gives one of the best performances I've ever seen from him. This is unlike any role he's ever done before. He's playing this very bitter, very just rude, and often cynical member of the Thrambe family, and he just completely relishes every second of what he's doing. You can tell that he's having the time of his life, and he is just an absolute riot in this film. I loved what he was doing here, and I think he was definitely one of the big standouts here for sure. I mean, the rest of the cast also does a great job. Toni Collette, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Don Johnson. Everyone really gets at least one big moment. I don't really think there was anyone in this film that felt underserved to me in that way in terms of acting, and I was overall very impressed by this cast here. There's so many recognizable actors, and even some of the smaller performances, like Kate Callan, for example, the matriarch of the family that is kind of senile and very quiet in that way and doesn't really say much, but somehow she still finds ways to stick out. Noah Segan is one of the cops, or Frank Oz. I mean, everyone really does stick out here and rounds out what I think is maybe the best ensemble cast of the entire year. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because that is really what I love about this film. I mean, Rian Johnson's directing is just so excellent here. He's able to craft what seems like a very typical whodunit and really turn it on its head. This is very much a satire in that way. This film is also absolutely hysterical. There were so many moments that just had me rolling on the floor with laughter. It might just be the funniest film of the entire year, to be honest. There were so many moments that I think people are going to get a real kick out of, and he does a great job with that. But the other thing he does a great job with is when he decides to take the mystery seriously. He still does an excellent job with that, and the bait and switch especially, it can be very hard for a director to pull that off, but he just puts so much into this film, so much passion, so much effort. It really seemed like he is a fan of whodunits, but he's also trying to do his own thing, and I really did appreciate that. And when the film gets a lot darker, I thought he did such a great job with that here, and I was very impressed by what he ended up doing with this film. I just loved every single second of his directing here, but his writing is really what needs to be commended. This, for me, if I had to choose, if I had to make a big decision, like what should be nominated for Best Original Screenplay, this should absolutely be a lock. I do still think Parasite probably has the best screenplay of the entire year, that or Irishman, but Knives Out absolutely should be in there for sure. This is easily one of the best. I mean, right off the bat, it's so quotable. There's so many lines in this film, not just from the trailer, that I can already see people quoting. I can already see this ending up on, like, you know, best quotes of the year lists and things like that. There's so many moments like that, but just the story in general is not really what you think it is. It starts out like your typical mystery for sure, and you really do love it for that, but there's a certain portion of this movie where we find out some information, and after this happens, the film goes in a completely different direction, and that's why I really respect this film as much as I do. It's not just because Rian Johnson was able to subvert my expectations. That's not the only reason I love it. I love it because it makes this film something a lot different. It makes the film work in a way that I really wasn't expecting it to, and it really brings out the best in the film. This is very much a social commentary on the rich and how they go about things, but also how they treat those that they feel are inferior in that way. We get very much into that, and like I said, a lot of that is because of Ana de Armas's character, who this really is her movie. And when you find out how she is tied to all this and her personal stakes in this film, that's really when this film gets truly great and really does take off. There's a lot that she is going through that I really don't want to ruin for you, but let's just say she's very much struggling in her life, and the family doesn't really give her that respect that she really does need. And we've seen this covered before in things like Parasite and Joker and Us and things like that, but this film goes about it in a very different manner, and I really did appreciate that. And like I said, it's not really your typical murder mystery, so because of that, it wasn't a film where I was consistently trying to guess, like, what's actually going on here. I just was kind of seeing what Johnson was trying to do. I kind of was just really into what he was doing. And a lot of mystery films, I do end up doing that, but this is not really that kind of film. This is a film where very early on, you know a lot of information, a lot more than you would expect to know in a film like this, especially in its first act. But literally the end of the first act, that's when you find out what's really going on here. And once it goes down that road, that's when it really does take off in that way. And by going in this direction, the movie kind of misleads you into thinking this is no longer a murder mystery. But you also kind of feel like there's always something more going on. So when the rug is eventually pulled out, it's even more effective in that way. And again, it's because the film went so off kilter, went into uncharted territory that you're not expecting a film like this to go into. And I really did appreciate that here overall. But that's not at all to say that the rest of the family isn't a big part of this movie, because they absolutely are. And I think people are really downplaying just how much of the movie they really are in. I mean, most of these characters, we get something interesting going on with them. Whether it's Jamie Lee Curtis and her having this very problematic, marriage with Don Johnson's character, and them kind of struggling with that, or Toni Collette and her trying to support her daughter and going to college, or someone like, say, Michael Shannon and all the struggles that he's going through. We at least get something with each of these characters. And then, of course, there's Chris Evans' character, who is very much the black sheep of the family. He is very much frowned upon. People call him Ransom because, well, that's exactly what he is. He's just someone that is complete scum to them, and whenever he comes on, he is just an absolute delight as well. So again, the film remembers to flesh out as many of these characters as they can, but also try to shed light on this one subject. But I think a lot of people will also find the film very relatable. The family itself, I mean, there are many members in there that we all kind of have. We all, there's a great scene where they are all very much divided politically. One is very much on the right, one is very much on the left. And it never feels like the film is taking a side in that way. It feels very neutral, and I definitely did appreciate that. The film does eventually take a side when it comes to Ana de Armas's character, but in terms of this scene, I think it works best that it kept things neutral. It's kind of being like a satire in that way, and we all have had heated political debates and things like that within families, and I think that's something that people are really going to relate to. And there's many members in here, like I said, the black sheep of the family, or like someone that's always mocked at, and that's something the film still does a really great job with. Even though it's not really about the family, the film still does enough to get you to love this family and get you to really show how, even though a lot of this family, yeah, they're not good people very much at all. A lot of them are really inherently bad with what they're doing. They treat many people that aren't in their inner circle like shit, and you very much do see that throughout the film. They still find a way to make them likable. They still find a way to craft some really interesting and fun characters, and I really did appreciate that here overall. And like I said, this film is fucking hysterical. There's so many moments that I think people are going to be remembering for sure. There's a car chase especially that is so great. Any scene involving Daniel Craig and Chris Evans are just huge highlights. There's so many great scenes going on here. And it's one of those movies where, yeah, you've seen a lot of funny scenes in the trailer, but there's a lot of stuff you haven't seen either that again, I would love to get more into, but just to spare you guys and to make sure that just so you guys know as little as possible going into it, which you very well should with this movie, I'm going to try to keep it as minimal as possible, but there are just so many moments that I'd love to get more into, and I think are truly some of the funniest of the entire year. There's also a fantastic running gag with Ana de Armas's character that I really can't get into, but let's just say there is something that happens whenever she lies in this movie, and it's something that could have been, I think, really annoying, and something that I think really could have gotten old after a while, but they always use it at just the right times, and it makes for such a fun and just ridiculous sort of gag they do, and I think it just works perfectly. And again, it's one of those things that, like, it shouldn't work, but somehow it just does, and it was, anytime it came, one of the funniest scenes in the entire film. And like I said, I wasn't really expecting this film to cover these issues that it was, but it really does dive deep into issues like, say, disenfranchisement and immigration and other things that I can't really get into how exactly it does cover them, but I really do applaud the film for going there. I was not expecting that really at all, and the fact that they're still able to do that, but still be so bitingly funny in that way, and be so just entertaining. It's very hard for any film to pull off, but the fact that Johnson was able to do that here, that's why this film, I think, is as good as it is. That's why this film is truly commendable in that way, and that's why, for me, it's one of the best screenplays of the entire year overall. I just absolutely loved what was going on here. The cinematography in this film is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just the look of the mansion that the Thrombes are staying at, it really feels like a character of its own. You very much do feel trapped here, but it also has a lot of secrets. There's a lot of things going on in this house that, the family is keeping from each other, and I think they did a really good job with that overall, and I really did love the cinematography here. There's one shot in particular that is truly masterful. It's actually the final shot of the movie, and oh my god, it's one of the best final shots of the entire year. I'd love to talk more about, but again, heavy spoilers, so can't really get into it all that much, but I just really loved the cinematography here. The score here as well is truly fantastic. It gives you that very suspenseful vibe, but it also has a very playful sense to it, and I just really love the score here quite a bit. And the editing, I thought this film was extremely well paced. I really did fly by for me in that way. The film is over 2 hours, but you never really feel a single second of it. I was pretty much locked in from the final scene. And again, it's one of those films where there's always something interesting going on, and I think they did such a great job with that in that way. And I was very impressed by the editing with this film. And again, once you find out what's going on, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, the film slows down. For me, that's when it picked up. That's when it got even better, is when we actually found out what was happening. Because, again, it went to completely uncharted territory in that way, and I think they did a really great job with that. So in terms of flaws with this film, there really isn't a lot that I dislike about it. Really, I'm kind of coming up empty when it comes in terms of flaws here because there's so much to love about it. But if I really had to, like, pick a flaw, there are some characters here that do feel a little underused and feel like they could have had a little bit more to do. Katherine Langford's character, for example, we get a good idea of what she is going through, but I wish there was a little bit more going on there. I wish we had a little bit more of a resolution to her storyline. Same with Jaeden Martell's character. As much as I enjoy him kind of being like this, this kid that everyone kind of like laughs at because he's always on his phone and he's typing all of these terrible things and they love to make fun of him for that. And he very much works as that. I wish there was just a little bit more going on. He only has like 3 or 4 lines, and I wish there was a little bit more going on with him there. But really, other than that, this is such a phenomenal film that is completely different from what you're expecting. It finds a way to be so relevant, but not beating you over the head with it. It has one of the best screenplays the entire year, one of the best casts the entire year, some impeccable directing from Rian Johnson, some of the funniest moments that you will see all year. Daniel Craig especially. Daniel Craig and Chris Evans especially are just absolutely hysterical in this film. I really would love to get into why, but oh my god, they just had me rolling on the floor with laughter throughout the entire film. It has a twist that you're definitely not going to see coming, and it goes in a direction that you're not really expecting it to, and yet it still finds a way to do its own thing. It still finds a way to go in a completely different direction, and they say it's very hard to do that with a film like this because it's been done to death, but still, the film finds a way to channel its inner Agatha Christie, but still turn it on its head and be something completely different entirely. And just seeing how much Rian Johnson reinvents himself and how willing he was to go to the places he did, that's why I think this film is truly as great as it really is. Knives Out is easily one of the best films of the entire year, and I'm going to give it an A. Look, I know there's a lot of people that are going to want to boycott this film because, oh, Rian Johnson has a new movie coming out, but trust me, this is one that is very much not to be missed, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised with just how great of a film this really is and what Johnson can do when he really is firing on all cylinders in that way. But definitely try to see this movie this weekend. I really can't recommend it enough. I also think it's a really good Thanksgiving film, just considering what it does with the family and things like that. There's a lot of conversations they have, like I said, with the political stuff that I think a lot of people are going to find very relatable, and in that way, I think it is a really good Thanksgiving film. But overall, guys, in my review of Knives Out, let me know what you guys saw this film overall, if your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.